This week, Natasha and I sat down with Bryant Troupe. He's the owner, founder, and chief everything of Gravity IT Solutions. And it's interesting, we were talking to him before the podcast started and just talking about titles, and literally said he's the chief of everything because you have to wear a different hat when you're an entrepreneur and business owner. So it was another incredible conversation. And Natasha and I actually met him through BNI, which is Business Network International. And it's an incredible organization that connects people, not just within the community, but across the globe. There's chapters everywhere. And at some point, we'll probably do a podcast just about BNI because it's been an incredible introduction to us as we're opening our business. And Brian is a member of BNI, and it's been an incredible introduction to him. And we wanted to have him on the podcast and share his story. And he absolutely delivered in just walking through the journey of being a business owner, being a family man, and really supporting a lot of different communities. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Tell Us Your Story.
Welcome to Tell Us Your Story. Join us as we step into the arena with business owners, leaders, and influencers. Hear their stories as they navigate challenges, opportunities, and victories on their journey to success. As Theodore Roosevelt once said, it is not the critic who counts, but the man or woman who is actually in the arena.
I grew up in the South Bay in Southern California, Redondo Beach and Hermosa Beach. Basically born and raised in that area. Then went away to college. Well, I don't want to jump ahead. Yeah, I guess I don't ever go too deep into growing up.
We always like to start. We like to start real deep in there. So what about family life? Siblings, parents. What was kind of the household?
Household of 4. So I have a younger sister, and then my parents. My parents are still together, so that also is kind of a unique thing in today's age. And had pretty good friends. Grew up kind of working and started working at 14. And
so were your parents entrepreneurial?
No, my father, he worked at Honeywell. He sold mainframe computers. My mom went through several different career iterations. She was a teacher, and she was also selling insurance kind of in my early kind of pre-teen years, I think. So.
Okay, and your sister, was she entrepreneurial?
No, my sister has special needs, so she was adopted when she was about she was adopted as a baby, and then we started to find out she had some needs, that special needs essentially symptoms. So.
Okay, and are you the older brother?
I am the older brother.
Okay, so we'll get into where this entrepreneurial spirit comes in because it's always fascinating to me. So. Tell us a little bit about what type of student you were going through, let's say late elementary, middle, early high school.
Okay, yeah. I was a pretty good student. Interesting story, in 3rd grade, my 3rd grade teacher did not like me and said I was a bad student. So I started being a bad student in 3rd, was that 3rd? No, that was 4th grade. And then by the next year, I had a teacher that was pretty supportive. So I was a pretty good student, B and A student, generally for the most part. Honor roll student, got an award in 8th grade. Yeah, I like school. I like learning. And I think sometimes having good teachers is interesting. Good teachers are usually the ones that are the toughest. So you appreciate it later on. You don't always appreciate when you're going through it.
Well, I was just going to say, and you remember those teachers that tell you that you're a bad student or you can't be this when you grow. You hear those stories so often. It's like, yeah, I had this one teacher that told me I shouldn't have been an actor, right? And then you grow up and you do that. So I think they have a profound, or can have a profound impact on kids. I know we'll get into the IT thing, but would you say that IT, were you doing things like that young? Was that some of your hobbies, or did that not come until later?
Yeah, I definitely took to it very early, as well as business. I took my first computer class in 2nd grade. Wow. And it's funny because my memory of it is probably a little foggy, but I remember taking a summer course that my mom signed me up for computers. And I kind of even remember being the only person in the class, but, learning on old apples and at that time. And I always had an interest in business and a lot of kind of wide ranging interests, including architecture. And one summer I spent I would spend the week at my grandparents because my parents were both kind of busy working, and then I'd go back home on the weekends. And those were, I call them the wonder years, which I have a lot of fond memories of those summers. And I remember like opening up a lemonade stand, and something kind of funny that happened out of that. We opened up this lemonade stand, and I recruit some of the kids around the block, and I borrow some money from my grandparents for day one. And we opened up the lemonade stand, and the plan was to pay back all my grandparents' money and buy supplies for the second day. So we didn't get paid day one. But I remember one of the other parents thought I ripped off their kid. And so they weren't allowed to play with me after that because they thought I was not paying them for it. But it was, hey, we're going to pay back, buy more supplies, and then day two we'll all get paid.
And so how old were you then?
So that had to be sixth or seventh grade, I'm guessing, those summers.
It's very entrepreneurial.
You're very entrepreneurial. I'm thinking, so you're taking summer classes for computers in second grade. You're starting businesses where I'm sure you had some help in understanding you're going to pay back day one to then fund day two. But I was playing kickball when I was at that age. So tell us about going into high school. What were your interests? What were you doing there?
By the time I started high school, I thought I might be an architect. Had an interest in kind of designing buildings, and we used to, like, another friend and I used to draw stadiums and stuff like that. And also journalism. I had a lot of interest. I played sports and ran track, played basketball. So as I started to kind of look at schools, I came home actually one day from, like, I don't remember if they had a college fair or something. I said, I know where I'm not going to go, because I was very independent. And basically I said, I'm not going to Cal Poly where my mom went. I'm not going to Redlands where my dad went. Like, just more of an independence kind of thing. But I didn't really know where I wanted to go till later. Early on in high school, like sophomore year, I was looking at a school up in upstate New York. But being a California kid, we actually went up and visited. And we went up in November. And my mom and my mom loves parades, so we went to the Macy's Day Parade, but it like snowed, and I was like, no, not for me. I won't get up for a class, because it was just too drastic of a weather change. So
wow, but college was always in the cards. That was that was always in the plan.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was. Both my parents, graduated from college, so that was always something that was on the radar. I also just, again, like learning, and so saw that as an opportunity.
And so what was the dream when you look back to your junior, senior year? What was the dream? And then are you on path for that dream, or did it completely change?
I think that it definitely changed a little bit. I knew I kind of wanted to I narrowed down, I wanted to go to a college town. So even being in LA, like UCLA, USC, those aren't really interesting because they were right in the middle of a city. So this idea of a college town where I could go away, and a lot centered around the campus. So I was looking at schools like that. I remember kind of some of the places I was, like Rice, U of A, that's where I ended up going, University of Arizona. And so, and the upstate school, now I knew I wasn't going to go to cold weather, so I had to find other places like that. And
how was college? What were you striving to be, or did you have a plan on what you wanted to do when you got out of college?
So I did enter the architecture program there, and my friend, one of my best friends was also at U of A. So he was a year older. So I had visited the campus. And that was one thing. When I visited campus, I fell in love with the campus. But when I got out there, he had been saying, hey, you should take MIS, because he knew I was into computers. And like when we were growing up, I'd be on the computer programming something or playing games or whatever. And so when I got there, I did take that as one of the courses. And architecture is an interesting major because, one, it's a 5-year program, so you're not done in 4 years. And everyone talked about when you're in architecture, you really start on the bottom. Like you essentially get no pay, And the other thing about the architecture building, when you drive by it, every day, you drive by on a Sunday night, the lights are on, you see students in the, didn't matter what time of day you were.
You're growing.
And also the program, and I don't remember, freshman year, I think there were about 300 students that had applied for architecture. They let 50 in the second year. So one, it's ultra competitive. And then the first year, one of the things they have you do is take a freehand art class. And a lot of people, me included, I'm not an artist in that sense. I was good with the T-square and the tools and all that stuff and drawing that way. But when it came down to actually freehand drawing, I was not good at it. So it wasn't kind of the best fit. And I started to like the MIS classes and the business side of.
And so was the goal to be your own business owner right out of college?
No, I don't know that I had a plan exactly what I wanted to do.
Which is normal.
Yeah, I just knew I liked learning. I did well when I worked all through high school and had a job and had good relationships with all the people where I had jobs. So the first couple of years. Back then, you could work at 14 and get a worker's permit. And also back then, you could find a job at 16 pretty easily. So I worked, my first job, I worked in fast food at Wiener Schnitzel. And then later, they opened up a AMC movie theater. And that's where I spent the most of my, from 16 on. And actually worked until, even through college, I was working at the theaters part-time.
Got it. So you graduate college and you're married. So let's stop there. So you're married. How many kids? Tell us about your wife and your family.
All right. I'm married. I have a total of 6 kids now. We got involved with fostering as a resource parent. So I have 3 natural born children, and I have 3 children that we are now essentially their guardians. So that have come through the foster program.
So raising a family by itself is a lot. What drew you to foster parent? Because that's such a thank you for doing that. Not everybody can do that. So massive blessing to those that you're taking care of. What brought you and your wife to want to do, and your kids, because they're part of it as well?
Yeah. So my wife was a teacher, and she also kind of grew up around kids a lot. Her mom ran a daycare, things like that. So she kind of mentioned it. She hadn't mentioned it in a long time. 2020, 2019, she kind of, hey, I want to foster. And it was kind of out of the blue. And I was like, okay. So we started to kind of look into it. You have to go through some training to do that. And so we went through some of those seminars and the training.
Hold on. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. I'm smiling over here because you're either the greatest husband in the world or something's missing. She just goes.
Well, I'm thinking, which I'm surprised that it was your wife, because so you said that your sister's adopted. So
Yes.
I was thinking maybe that was something that was kind of, more natural to you or something that you wanted to do. So when you said it was your wife and that is recent within the last couple of years, I wasn't sure what the time frame was. So I thought it was both of you, but that was just you were just good with it.
Yeah,
it was
no
just
debate. No, hey, let's talk about this for a year.
Well, I said let's look into it, and so I'm pretty open minded. So hey, you never know until you try, and it's interesting the feedback you get back when you hear about fostering. People, I think about doing that, but they don't always take the steps to do it, and so I was willing to kind of explore that and see what it was about, and learn about how the fostering program works, and
I'm so fascinated. So I want to circle back to when you met your wife. That was what I was trying to get to. But the fostering piece is super interesting, really interesting to me. So how many did you start off with? Just one child?
All right. So we had our 3 kids. We had my oldest, and who's now 21, and then my youngest is now 13. So there's a gap there, and then my middle one's 18. So this was 2020. Okay, I'm thinking this through. We did talk about it with the kids to make sure that was something they wanted to do, because obviously it was going to impact them. We had kind of room in our house. When we initially signed up, we had signed up to take on 1, and they were going to share a room with my youngest son. And it was kind of important to us that he didn't get displaced where he was in the pecking order of a family. So we wanted them, the foster child, to be his age or younger. So we were on the list. And obviously what was interesting about 2020, due to COVID, a lot of fostering reporting happens at school. Schools were closed. So we finished our process, I think, in February of 2020, but we didn't get our first child until September of that year. And that was just due to how there was nobody reporting, people weren't going to school, things like that. And the fact that often you get sibling sets that come into fostering. So we got a foster child at that point. And then later on, we decided we would get a bunk bed, another bunk bed in that room to make more room. And that's when it opened up to us, then when we started to be able to take 2 kids at a time or more than that.
It's absolutely amazing, not just for you and your wife, but then to have the kids that are obviously supportive, your natural born children. It's just incredible. It's an incredible thing to do. I'm in awe of it because it's not something that I haven't explored it, but it would be a really big step for me to think about going down that path. So very, very cool. Last question from me on that. So maybe any challenges as you went through that, with bringing children in?
I mean, obviously there's absolutely challenges. The more people you bring into any environment, the more chance at conflict you can have. You do have issues with some of the kids that you go through. Also, I mean, you work with generally what happens is you get set up with an agency, and when they have kids that need placement, they have their list and they'll kind of reach out. And so you have the ability to kind of set some parameters, examples that you might say, I don't want kids that have been sexually abused or some other extreme or in extreme and violent situations, or kids that have tendency to exhibit violence or things like that. So you can kind of set some parameters there. And then you definitely still have to be your own advocate when you're talking to some of the placements, because sometimes they're really looking to try and find a placement. So you've got to ask a lot of questions, and you've got to think on, hey, is that something you want to take on?
So have you had the 3, so was the household all 6 kids at one time, or have you transitioned some out, or are they all with you still?
No, so at the peak periods, we did have 6 kids in the house. So now there's 5 in the house because my oldest is away at school. And so we've got 5 in the house. So yeah.
Yeah. You're quite the houseful. I bet you have some very fun days.
Well, and it makes them interesting, challenging. I mean, it's funny when you think about it. Generally, everything is designed for a family of 4, right? Even like cars, you start to run out of issue. So we had to get a minivan, and sometimes we have a full minivan, obviously. So
it's like the purpose of the podcast, obviously tell the story and talk about people's businesses and what they've gone through. So you're managing your own business. You said you're the chief of everything, in addition to taking this on. So we'll bring it all together. So when you got out of college, when did you meet your wife? Was it during college, after college?
No, it was after college and several years of working. So I was in my mid-20s, essentially, when I think we met, mid to late 20s.
And how long have you guys been married now?
We have now been married 23. It will be 23 years this year.
Congratulations.
Oh, congratulations.
Okay,
so when you get out of college, do you go right into opening your own business, or... No. You go into the workforce?
I worked, I went into the workforce. I worked my first, technically, I didn't have a job right out of school. And when I graduated, I was kind of open to looking at different jobs and kind of working anywhere. So I remember I did have an interview I got flown up to Santa Cruz for, and I don't think any other job interviews that I flew out for. So I ended up moving back home. And as I mentioned, I worked at the movie theaters, but a lot of the managers that I had worked with had moved over to their regional offices. So they needed help. So I was temporarily working there for a little while I looked for a job. and I applied for a job at Activision. Ironically, I was a big Activision fan because growing up I was playing games, and at some point I'd even written a letter to Activision about some game ideas or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And so I applied there. It took most of the summer to get me hired, but then I did start my kind of career there, working in tech support, just answering the phones for people that couldn't get their games working. And this is the kind of the mid 90s, pre-internet. So you had to, when you had a computer, you actually had to type in code to get it to boot and all that stuff. And so we're walking through people over the phone, typing in commands. So that's kind of how I started. And
So I was going to ask, so you go through college, you change your majors and what you want to do. Are you now, as you're doing this tech support, are you on path that this is what you want to do? Are you feeling like this is your place, you're fulfilled?
Yeah, I really liked Activision. I definitely say it started my career. It's where I got my most of my experience. Activision at the time was in Brentwood actually, and we had even moved there. So I went through a move and doing all the IT infrastructure during a move. You learn a lot. So
go ahead.
Oh, I bet. I just was thinking about all of the just recently technology. I know, I always think COVID, that was the biggest thing. We had to move hundreds of people from an office with all this hardware to home. And I just feel like IT, it shifted that way. And, you have to have somebody on call basically 24/7. People who, I'm not savvy with a computer, and you have to have somebody there that helps. So I'm just thinking, I can't tell if it seemed harder back then or now with the technology. So to me, it's fascinating, but it's a tough, I think, industry, tough job.
I think I'm going to pry into that in a little bit once we get to where you're at now. So
Yeah.
I do want to start to transition. So when do you decide to go out on your own and open your own business?
Okay. I worked at Activision for about 4 years, and then I worked at 2 other corporate jobs. And during that time, I had actually been doing work on the side with clients. I had a close friend that was a realtor, and realtors are essentially independent contractors. So she would kind of pass my card out to realtor friends, and I picked up some other clients along the way. So I'd work on weekends and nights with those clients. And my last job, I got laid off. So this was in 2022, I think. And when I got laid off, it wasn't unanticipated. So I said, I'm going to start my own business. I want to work with small businesses. And like during the time when I started working with small business, I had a lot of fun. My first client was a physical therapy office in Pacific Palisades, and they were about 10 employees, and they had a server and all that stuff. So I did a lot of their IT work, but it was always interesting that when I'd go into a new business, I kind of even remember the first appointment. I'd go in, and they were having some sort of internet problem, and I was like, "Well, what's your password to your router?" No one knows, right? Like they don't nothing's documented, so. That was kind of a realization to me that when I started working with people that I would document everything and have records of what was done and make sure clients kind of, when they got their invoices, well, what was this for, and what was done. And so that was a big thing, working with those small businesses, being able to help them and add a professional level of IT support to their business.
So I want to stop here and ask a couple of questions around this, because I think it's really important for those that are going through similar situations. Being laid off is not an easy, that. There's so many emotions that go through it, and it happens every day. And you're watching the news today, it's a big topic. And it's not necessarily ever a reflection of that individual, but those that have been through it really internalize it. So you make a decision to open your business. What advice would you give to people that are going through that situation and they're on the fence? Do I send out 100 resumes or 1,000 resumes, or do I chase my dream? Like what process did you go through, and what advice would you have?
I think you've got to really know yourself. What was interesting when I started the business, I kind of pulled together a couple of the people that I work with in various IT departments. And I go, hey, would you be interested in starting a company with me? And so I actually kind of did it with a group of people. But in time, they all dropped off because when it got down to doing some of the dirty work, you have to do everything. So you kind of where I'd reach out and go, hey, do you mind doing that? No, they're not really interested in doing that. So so I ended up doing a lot of those. So yeah, eventually it ended up being just me in the business for a good period of time. And so kind of knowing yourself and being willing to do any work that needs to get done. Eventually, as you grow, you'll be able to hire people and get help. Also, having a good network to fall back on and get help from. Don't be scared to ask advice. It takes a lot of figuring out. I'm kind of a book junkie, so I like to read and listen to, well, now it's listening to audio books, but The E-Myth is a really good book to read before you start a business to understand, by Michael Gerber. Okay. So that would be something to take into perspective. And then I think the biggest thing that I didn't do that if I could do differently, knowing your exit strategy for your business. In other words, a lot of people just kind of jump into it, but what's the end goal? Do I want to sell the business? When I stop working, am I just going to close the business? And that was something I didn't even figure out until, recently. I mean, last 5-10 years that I started to go, hey, I need to have an exit strategy. And I do want to create a business that can go on without me. So.
Did you have all of those emotions of, once you made the decision to start your own business, were you afraid? Were you concerned? Was there the times you're like, oh man, maybe like, I don't know about going back, but it's all those things that you think about as a new business owner?
Well, at that point, I was married and we had just bought a new house.
Oh my, your timing
so this
is impeccable.
This isn't within I think within 2 months of buying the house.
Ooh.
Oh.
So we're taking on our first mortgage together. I'd actually owned a home previously, but we'd upgraded that home as we moved into it. So obviously I went home and talked to my wife about it, but having a small basis of clients already, and I always left jobs in a good status. And so one of the first things I did is reach out to several of my managers and coworkers at Activision. And I ended up getting a contract for about 20 hours a week to fill half of my time working that contract. And then the remaining time I could grow. So, and a lot of those things just kind of happened because I, again, kind of reached out for help when I needed it and kind of found out where people are and what they are. One of those managers was actually the one that referred me to that physical therapy office. And it was kind of interesting. At one point when I looked back at my history, I was trying to remember. I ended up working a lot in the Palisades, and my last job was actually a company that was based in Pacific Palisades, and so I had a lot of clients in that area. So
wow.
And so when you look back to that year one, which everybody that I've talked to, we're in, I think, week 6. Everyone that's of owning our own business in year one, what was your biggest challenge? And if you could do something different now with that challenge, what would it be?
I think at that time, I basically offered what we call break-fix services. So we essentially just take calls when people call with help. Now I'm focused on managed services, which is we generally have an ongoing relationship with our clients where we do proactive maintenance on their computers, protection, security. And so we have a package that includes all of those services. So at the time, I was basically just trying to find clients and build that client base, especially business. I did both residential and commercial. I've now kind of narrowed what I want now is primarily commercial. I still like to try to help people, but having that focus of really focusing on commercial. So I think those were things that I wish I would have known then, that, if I focus on commercial, if I focus on support plan and ongoing maintenance, I probably could have grown it a lot faster.
And you think that's a result of, as an entrepreneur and a new business owner, and I've heard a lot of business owners say this, they don't have their niche down for a while. They're trying to bring everything in. They're casting a huge net.
Yes.
Was that part of it? Were you just trying to, like, I need business?
I think that is a big piece of it. And so by focusing in on a target market, you can definitely put yourself in a better position. And it allows you, even when, like, as you start to grow, what am I going to train my staff on, right? You don't have to train them on everything now. You have to train them on the target market. So I think having that, and a lot of those realizations came in 2021. I joined an organization that helps basically IT business owners grow their business. Primarily they're a marketing organization, but now they offer services that help with your operations. You got a lot of mentors that are in the industry and that have already done what we're trying to do. So that was a program that I joined in 2021.
And before you joined that program, how was it introduced to you? Did you know about it? Like, there's a lot of programs in all industries, right? And
Yes.
sometimes people look at it and like, I don't need that. I can do this on my own. And then eventually maybe they end up in there, or maybe they do it on their own. So you walk us through that process and what advice you would have, like, for people that are looking at those industry opportunities. Do you join? Do you research? Like, there's a lot of different paths to go.
Yeah, knowing what I know now, I always, it's probably good advice that, like, when you're networking, hey, join a network that's in your community, join a network that's in your industry, and then, join several networks. So you have some diversity. And joining that one in your industry is kind of where that falls. So I think that was really important. I would attend events. I was aware of that organization specifically. They're a big name in marketing. It's run by a woman, Robin Robbins, and so she's really known in the industry. I had bought a marketing kit from her that sat on a shelf for a while that never gets used. And it's this, you'll hear this story from a lot of the people that go into her program. It sits on the shelf. And then I finally took advantage of one of the they have a boot camp every year. So I went out to their boot camp, and that was eye-opening. And so that helped me kind of reset some goals and figure out what I wanted to do with my business.
Yeah, I love it. Like, when I think about whether it's an entrepreneur or part of corporate, like, trusting the process, which this is what it reminds me of. Like, not everything is going to work for everybody, but those boot camps and those things, if you can glean something from that and implement it and trust the process, I would imagine it's not an overnight success. It takes time to work at it. But you need that help and that support from community to get there, figure it out. You don't know what you don't know.
Right. Absolutely. So, and there's a lot we don't know.
Yeah, I think the timing too, when you're in a place to be receptive of that as well. So had you been, because I looked you up a little bit more before I got here. So your business, I think I saw you started in early 2000. Like, is that correct?
Yeah, the precursor, 2001, when I got laid off, that was the starting of the business. Kind of the quick version of what happened. So I ran that business. My original company name was called Tech Services Group, because it was that idea of, the original idea was, hey, let's get people that do tech support in different areas, an AV specialist, a web developer, and I would be IT, kind of form a company, we can get the support staff we need and jointly pay those positions. Hey, pay somebody to answer the phone for all of us, pay somebody to do all of our books. That was kind of the original concept. It never really developed. And so I basically ran that business. In 2013 is when we moved to Northern California, just due to our family growing. We kept outgrowing houses. And at one point I had an office with a couple of part-time employees in Southern California. And we needed a larger house. So we started kind of looking around to move. We ended up in Northern California. So then I rebranded the company because I had to remarket everything anyways. And I brought on one of my last employees as a partner into the business. And so we started to grow Gravity IT Solutions up here. So
Got it. And so is that program that you mentioned from Robin Robbins, was that you did that later on? Like, that wasn't a year one
no,
venture
that
for
was
you.
much
that
later
was like
on.
Way later.
Yes.
You've been through some real life business ownership experience. So just, I think sometimes too, if you do things, it might be great, right? But they're going to sit on the shelf maybe until you're ready to use them in a way that kind of moves you forward, which I think is interesting. So your company now, so you changed it over. So it's Gravity IT Solutions. You're focused on commercial. Can you tell us just a little bit more about your business now today?
Yeah. So we specialize in businesses with 4 to about 25 users. That's our real target. The reason it's 4 is usually companies have to get big enough to realize, oh, I can't do this like I'm a one-man show. So you have to share information, you have to secure stuff between users, and you kind of have to kind of do things in a way that works for all your employees and staff. So 4 to 25. Generally privately owned companies. A lot of the larger companies like insurance might have their own help desk for certain things. We can still help them if they need help, purchasing computers and setting them up, because a lot of times those help desks are just for their own internal systems, but they might still need help outside of that. Another area that we can help businesses in are phone systems. So I'm a telco agent, so that means I can essentially sell any internet service provider or phone service provider and set up. So we always say the ideal time to get a customer is usually either when they're just starting and going to move into an office, or they're moving into an office, or they're outgrowing an office and expanding that office. Because a lot of times they're going to have to choose to make changes already. Because often the biggest challenge is getting anybody to change something is a little bit harder than, oh, I'm already changing, I'm moving. And also when you're moved, you're moving, you're overwhelmed by the number of things you have to do. So we can take a load off of the business owner while they're going through that transition.
So what's the biggest challenge that you face in your business?
Right now, as I try to grow it, I think hiring has been a big challenge. There was a period where I went through an audit with the EDD because I had contractors and they didn't like that classification. So I went through a whole process of that. And the irony of it, I was a small business owner. I had one contractor and I went through this huge audit that literally kind of took 3 years from start to end.
Wow.
Ooh.
And they were working part-time. Like, I don't remember. They had worked under 100 hours in a year. And I'm going through this whole process with this EDD audit. And I also think I probably could have won because during the audit, I was able to kind of review the reports that they were saying, and a lot of the things weren't actually correct. But it was one of those things, having gone through it, I'm like, it's way easier just to classify them as employees and move on, right?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't worth it. So
it's one of those things you hear about, like, why is it so hard to have your own business? And this is like, you got to jump through these hoops, whether it's certifications or whatever the case may be. Like, this is an unexpected event. Like, why am I going through this?
Yeah.
What's the biggest opportunity you see in your business?
Biggest opportunity. I think the biggest opportunity right now for my business and other managed service providers is in the security and compliance areas. A lot of small businesses need help, and compliance can be as simple as they take credit cards, and so they have PCI compliance requirements. They might need to run a scan on their network each year to complete their application for PCI compliance. Also, if they're looking at cyber liability insurance, there's often a lot of IT requirements around those. And the biggest target that we're really focusing on are clients in kind of financial services, taxes. They collect personal information from clients, and so they have some requirements under FTC compliance guidelines. So I think that's the biggest opportunity in our business, because now these other organizations outside of just the IT provider are saying, hey, you need to start securing your networks and do a better job of training your employees and keeping your client information safe. So that's definitely an area where we're looking to grow and meet new clients.
How many, I can't do the math, 23, 24 years, 25 years your business has been in? Right around there?
Yeah, right around that time frame. And
what are you most proud of?
I think lasting that long is a big accomplishment in an industry that changes all the time. IT is constantly changing. I have also maintained a lot of good relationships with long-standing clients. So building those relationships, I think,
And so when we're just thinking about business owners in general, we had talked about, what advice you would have for someone to jump it. But what about year 2, 3, and 4? Like those years that I've heard are like the grind, the hard, the doubt. There's a lot of doubt. Maybe you didn't go through that, but advice you would give to people that are saying, do I stick with it or do I go back into the corporate world? Or what's your advice there? You've been the long haul. So
yeah. Well, that's actually a good question. There's a part of the story where in 2018, I mentioned when I moved up here, I had a partner. My partner decided to leave. And so I was at that point a little burnt out because there are times where, yes, it can be a grind as a business owner. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to kind of do it by myself, try to find another partner, look at jobs. And I did look out at jobs. And somebody that I had actually met that ran a larger managed service provider had a job posting. And I ended up taking a job at his larger MSP for a year.
Oh.
So I kind of put my business on hold for a short period of time, with the exception of like some of the core, like we were still selling like Microsoft and Google Workspace subscriptions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so the plan was to migrate them in and bring them into his business. And I worked there, and it did reinvigorate me a little bit in the sense that, one, when I got back and was working with him, hey, it was on a team. Not all the weight of the world is on my shoulders anymore. And I could get stuck on a
all of this.
Yes. I could get a technical problem and I could go, hey, talk it over with other techs. So that was like a big relief at that point in time. But also then I started to realize the things that I missed as being a business owner over time. So it was almost exactly a year that I was there before I kind of said, hey, I want to go back and launch my business. And I did. And so that was part of the journey to knowing, hey, this is what I really want to do. And once you start to be an entrepreneur, if you know that, it's hard to be an employee, right? Oh, you can't work over 8 hours. Hey, you're in trouble if you clock out at 8 hours and 1 minute because that's overtime, right? Like, and it was adjusting to that was a big challenge for me. So.
Did it? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Did it give you any? Because you said that was a managed service provider, and that's what you or moved to. So did it also give you any insights or things that you were like, okay, now I actually can go back and maybe do things differently or do something new? Did you take some of that and then implement it?
Absolutely. I mean, it was a great learning experience. The owner, his name's Sean Harris, he was trying to grow his business to be in a position to sell. And it was great hearing his story about, like, he bought the business from somebody else and grew it. And at that point, there were about 9 or 10 employees, and so he was working on growing. He had goals set and really running a business by numbers. So getting those examples. When I joined there, we were using a lot of the same systems. So I had familiarity with a lot of those things, and so there's definitely a lot that I learned there, not only about myself but about learning to grow the business. I later found out when I went back to a TMT event that he had sold his business and he'd hit his goal. And it's funny because I found out at one of the events because one of the vendors there, they buy managed service providers, and they're like, hey, we just bought a company in Sacramento. What's the name of them?
Wow.
And so I found out, that he had sold and met his goal that way. So.
Oh, very, very cool.
Yeah.
I want to dive in just a little bit. We won't have to spend too much time on it, but on that journey, 2018, you're an entrepreneur for 15, 16, 17 years. Was it hard to step away from your dream and your business and go to that job? Were there a lot of emotions with taking on that job? Or are you someone who's just like, that's what I got to do now, I'm going to take this?
I mean, I think it was definitely a decision I had to make. And with the goal being, hey, well, I could merge my clients in there and then maybe help grow that company and be a part of that. But I think that's where part of the challenge is that having equity in the business isn't something that's just happens, right? So that was the piece that I think I realized that I missed, is that, I actually want to have full equity in the business, or what I can create or what I can do, having control over what happens. So.
I love it. So we've talked, the time always goes by so quick. So you talked about an exit plan. So when we think about you in 5 years, or maybe even 10, where are you going with your business? What can we expect from you?
I'm hoping to grow it to have about maybe 10 employees, and I want to be more of a mentor. I'd love to grow it to become an employee-owned company that they can eventually buy into the business or earn their way into equity. So I want to have a business that I could sell, but I would rather sell it to the team that helps build it. But, I don't know what that looks like for sure. You never know. And an environment where everybody can grow. One of the realizations I have, is that sometimes even as you grow as a business owner, you can outgrow your clients, right? Because the goals that you're setting. So as long as you leave them in a good place, and that's a reality with employees, whether it's customers and all that stuff. So as you go through those different iterations, you've got to grow. And even a lot of the things I like doing in the business, I'm going to essentially have to kind of morph into another person to be the manager of the business. And that's what the E-Myth really talks about, that book, that you can't just be the technician in your business. You have to be the visionary for your business and the growth person for your business.
Yeah, so. Natasha says it a lot.
I think, and I'm trying to remember, somebody else recommended this, so now I really have to get it. It's that idea of if you're working in the business, you're not really working on the business. And I think it came from that one, that book as well, possibly, but now I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah. Well, as a sports fan, the analogy that I could use, if you think about an athlete, right? It's hard to be an athlete and a coach, right? They used to have player coaches, but those are two completely different roles. Then be a coach and then be a GM. GM is a completely different role. And then to own a team is a completely different role. So those are all the roles you kind of have to transition through in your business, and get to that point where you're actually the owner of the business, not the one just doing everyday work in the business.
So we have a lot of businesses that listen to the podcast. So those that are looking for your service, and we'll put everything on the social, and we'll put it out there. But what's your message to them if they want to work with you, and any message at all that you want to share with owners out there?
Yeah, if you're looking for some technology expert to add to your business, a lot of businesses don't have any technical expertise. Reaching out to a managed service provider like ourselves would be a good way to outsource that skill set. Time is valuable for the business owner too. So kind of our ideal client wants to save time and get expertise in an area that they don't necessarily have it. A lot of small businesses often resort to just using the person that knows the most about computers to do that. But that also means they're not doing their normal role in the business that they were probably most likely hired to do. So those are scenarios that we can take over. We always offer free consultations to try to get to know the business owner and make sure it's a good fit, and share what services we can help with.
And is that across just any different industry? I'm assuming in the consult is kind of understanding what their business does and their goals and all of that. So is it no restrictions on industry, or you kind of just see where you fit if it is a fit?
Yeah, generally. I know I probably like some of the state organizations, a lot of times there's certain requirements working with state and things like that. But generally, yeah, we work with private businesses for the most part.
Oh, so awesome.
And open to calls, emails to set up the free consultation, and then you guys can go from there. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we have you can always set up a free call right from our website. So we've got a link for that.
Awesome.
Well, I love it. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I love hearing people's stories. Love your journey. I think what you're doing with the family and the adoption is just absolutely incredible. So congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing both. We asked a lot of business questions, but also personal. And I know our listeners get something from every different, unique person and business owner that we talk to. So thank you for being so open and sharing your story.
Well, thank you for having me as a guest.